A reading from the first book of Kings. Elijah went to Zarephath of Sidon, to the house of a widow. The son of the mistress of the house fell sick, and his sickness grew more severe until he stopped breathing. So she said to Elijah, "Why have you done this to me, O man of God? Have you come to me to call attention to my guilt and to kill my son?" Elijah said to her, "Give me your son." Taking him from her lap, he carried the son to the upper room where he was staying and put him on his bed. Elijah called out to the Lord, "O Lord, my God, will you afflict even the widow with whom I am staying by killing her son?" Then he stretched himself out upon the child 3 times and called out to the Lord, "O Lord, my God, let the life breath return to the body of this child." The Lord heard the prayer of Elijah. The life breath returned to the child's body, and he revived. Taking the child, Elijah brought him down into the house from the upper room and gave him to his mother. Elijah said to her, "See, your son is alive." The woman replied to Elijah, "Now indeed I know that you are a man of God. The word of the Lord comes truly from your mouth." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Galatians. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel preached by me is not of human origin. For I did not receive it from human being, nor was I taught it, but it came through revelation of Jesus Christ. For you heard of my former way of life in Judaism, how I persecuted the church of God and beyond measure, and tried to destroy it, and progressed in Judaism beyond many of my compatriots among my race, since I was even more zealot for my ancestral traditions. But when God, from my mother's womb, had set me apart and called me through his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son to me, so that I might proclaim him to the Gentiles. I did not immediately consult flesh and blood, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me. Rather, I went into Arabia and then returned to Damascus. Then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to confer with Cephas and remained with him for 15 days. But I did not see any other of the apostles, only James, the brother of the Lord. The word of the Lord.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus journeyed to a city called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd accompanied him. As he drew near to the gate of the city, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he was moved with pity for her and said to her, "Do not weep." He stepped forward and touched the coffin. At this, the bearers halted, and he said, "Young man, I tell you, arise." The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, exclaiming, "A great prophet has arisen in our midst, and God has visited his people." This report about him spread through the whole of Judea and in all the surrounding region. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
As we enter into ordinary time, we enter into the normal cycle of readings. somewhat the cycle changes up a bit during the Advent, Lent, Easter, Christmas time frames. During those special seasons, the cycle moves away from its normal routine. But today we see a lot of the normal. The normal routine in the cycle of readings is that there's a first reading that we see its fulfillment in the gospel passage. The first reading is meant to be an Old Testament reading that somehow is being fulfilled in the gospel passage. That's the way the church picks them out. The second reading is just kind of randomly thrown in there. There's sometimes it matches, sometimes it's off in a completely different direction. But these two readings are fairly easy to grab a hold of and say, I can see the connection here. In the Old Testament, we have Elijah the prophet who is there, and there's a woman whose son dies, and he brings the child back to life. In the gospel passage, we have a woman whose son has died, and Jesus brings him back to life. Now, Elijah did it basically at the moment of death, whereas Jesus does it at the burial. I mean, they're on the way to the tomb, and he's bringing the person back to life, showing a greater miracle than even that of Elijah. But sometimes it's worth stepping back and asking, whose prayer was really answered here? And whose prayer wasn't? Sometimes when we hit readings like this, we read it in one way and we always read it that same way. We always see it from the same perspective. But take a step back. Look at the son in this picture. The son who died in this gospel passage had already gone through all the pain and suffering of death. He's on his way to his eternal reward. Did he really want to be drawn back? Clearly his mother's prayer was being answered in this, but was the son's prayer being answered? Sure, the son probably wanted to spend more time, probably wanted more things to do, but if we're really fixed on eternal life as our goal, was that really an answer to his prayer? Sometimes our prayers conflict. Sometimes we don't know what we're even praying for. This gospel passage actually makes me think back to a situation a decade and a half ago with a good friend of mine. My friend's mother had a lot of chronic illnesses and chronic pain. And he knew about it. He knew that she always suffered. She knew that she was suffering a lot. And yet some of her great joy was to spend time with him and his friends. One time, my friend asked me to do something, and immediately it hit me in the gut. I'm not sure if I want to do this. He asked me to pray, and he was asking all of his friends to pray, that his mom would stop suffering, that all of her pain would be taken away. And when he asked me, I don't know why, but it just hit me in the gut like, I'm not sure I want to pray for that because I'm not sure how it might be answered. There's the ancient Chinese curse, may all your wishes come true. But in that moment, it struck me, I don't know I want to pray for this. And honestly, I was good to my friend, and I prayed what my friend asked me to pray. And so did a lot of other people. And a few weeks later, my friend's mother passed away suddenly. And it was one of those things where that prayer was answered, but not in the way my friend was wanting it to be answered. Sometimes, I don't like being Debbie Downer, but sometimes it's important for us to take a step back when we're not in crisis mode, when we're not at a funeral, and stop and reflect on what prayers are answered when someone passes away. Many times when someone passes away at a great age, many times people are like, you know what? Those prayers were answered. That person's suffering is over, especially if it's been with long illness and long pain. But when they're middle-aged or when they're children, a lot of times it's hard for us to answer, why would God do this? Why would God take someone away? And it's worthwhile for us to flip it and think, what pain is this person missing? What pain is this person not going to have to endure? What pain would they have had if they'd had a longer life? The answer is, we don't know. We don't know why God takes somebody at a young age. We don't know why he takes somebody at an old age. We don't know why God takes them when they do. But it's important for us to say, Lord, I trust in you. Lord, I trust that you will take me at the time that is best for me. Lord, I trust that you care more about me than even I do. And you care about my loved ones more than I do. Lord, I trust in you. Lord, I trust that when you take a child, when you take an adult, you're bringing them home to what we're all aiming for, the joys of heaven. I know I normally give a little bit more cheerful homilies than this, but when we're not in crisis mode, it is important to stop and think about it. Our aim is not this life. Our aim is for heaven. May we really keep our eyes fixed on that. May we really trust in him, that all our prayers will be answered. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is no, I have something better. Sometimes the answer is no, he knows more than us. I hate it when that's the answer. But God is always keeping our best interest in mind, and in all things, he's calling us home.